Что такое советская власть?
Be clear here, not confused. I'm a socialist.
Chile is rich. Only the people are poor.
As long as they're working class, you'll have a communist party.
What's that book I got? The Russian guy? Stalin. I got that.
Fidel Castro, support our struggle to the hilt.
It is impossible for capitalism to answer the needs of the American people.
If I am a revolutionary, and you're going to have to keep on saying that.
And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
We are bound to transform society as far as crushing the parties and possible to crush the party because the party is one with
It's capital versus labor. It's capital versus labor. Because there's always conflict.
You don't mean exactly peace talks, you mean capitulation, surrendering. That's kind of conversation between the sword and the neck.
We know that what we are thinking here is actually American imperialism and not only Israel imperialism.
The pattern of development in our society has been consistently to deprive the working people of the capacity to make choices.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is heading the mighty world battle, and so that after all, the black man is capable of managing all of
The collapsing of the empire.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere.
And the crisis in the capitalist world has been...
La lucha armada es el único camino para la liberación.
That's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution. Right.
Yes, yes, yes. What is up? What is up? General Strike Podcast family, whatever you want to call it, history of socialism. Branding's all over the place. But anyways, impromptu live show. I got a new thing, like a webcam thing, so I can hook up like a really nice camera. So I wanted to try it out. I wanted to see what was up. I wanted to test it out. Obviously, I'm gonna watch this back and make sure the video's fine. But if you're watching, let me know if the video quality, all that stuff is decent. It should be much better than our last show. And I'm not gonna be on for long. There's only a few things I want to talk about. I didn't really prep as much for this show as in other shows, mainly because, again, this was an impromptu live stream. If you watch on YouTube, Twitch, hit the like button, share the show, all that fun stuff, all that fun jazz. But yeah, I mean, the last show I did was right before the inauguration. I recorded literally the day before the inauguration, and I released the show the day of. And yeah, a lot has happened. It's surprisingly hard to keep up with. I was working pretty heavily, like 60-hour weeks, especially that first week or 2 weeks after the inauguration, and it was hectic. It was hard to keep up with the news. It was hard to keep up with all the different executive orders that Trump was sort of throwing out there. I mean, we have a lot to talk about. And again, I apologize, I didn't do enough prep for this show. I will be back on next weekend for sure with a very, very good guest. I'll announce it later. But a philosophy professor. We're going to talk about Hegel. So all you Hegel heads, get excited for that show, I guess. Again, I'm not a big fan of Hegel. I haven't read much. But again, I know there's a lot of Marxists that live and die by Hegel, so we got to talk about him, and I'll rather bring on an expert to talk about him instead of me. So next weekend, we'll record a podcast for that. It won't be a live stream, but next weekend, let's stay a look out for that one. I do have a skeleton of an article working out about Western Marxism. What are its ideological and material roots, and basically why Western Marxism has fallen behind in a lot of regards. I'm writing an article on that probably in the next week or two, it will be out. So Substack, link tree down below. Make sure you go there to see all my other articles. But again, it's a late night stream. We're not going to be on for long. If you have any questions you want to throw at me, I can talk about anything. So comment in the live chat. Let me know any questions, any thoughts. I do also want to like preemptively announce that we are going to have a big guest on. Not to diminish the other guest I talked about, but a very, very big guest potentially coming on in the next week or so. One of my absolute heroes and inspirations is potentially going to be on the show. So very excited for that as well. So a lot to stay tuned for. But like I said, any topics you guys want me to discuss, throw it in the chat. But I do want to talk about the nonstop protests we've been seeing in the last week or so. It has really ramped up. Now, obviously, that's couched with all of the executive orders that Trump has thrown out, like, birthright citizenship, like the Lincoln Riley Act. Like, there's certain ones that have been thrown out, certain laws that have either been implemented or are now tied up in courts. But regardless, that was the impetus of this wave of protests we've seen and sustained protest throughout both the Southwest, Midwest, and the East Coast. We've seen pretty much nonstop protests for about a week, every day. And here in Los Angeles, it's been raining for the last 3 days or so, and that has not stopped protesters at all from coming out. Every day we're hearing about students leaving their schools and going out to protest, closing down freeways. It's been pretty big. And I think for a lot of people, this is echoing other instances of mass protest movements. And the question that I have, and, if you're listening, if you're watching, let me know in the chat your thoughts as well to some of these questions. But I think these are the questions we have to start asking ourselves is, one, can this type of intensity be sustained long term? Two, will this lead to a qualitative shift in the class struggle, right? Those are very important questions to ask. And the second one kind of answers the first and vice versa. There's that sort of dialectical relationship between the two. I'm of the opinion that this is somewhat unsustainable. To expect every day during weekdays for there to be mass protests is a little bit hard due to one, work, to school, right? Like most of the people that are out there in the protests have work and have school. So they're naturally busy during these days and hours that we are seeing the protests. So that's why the protests, to me at least, take a special note of, because this is out of the norm. It's not normal to see hundreds, if not thousands of people in multiple cities throughout the country sustained protests for a week long, throughout the week, regardless of bad weather. That's something special. Now, do we see a qualitative shift to this? Potentially. I think it comes with what the state response will be, right? If we see Trump or local police or sheriffs start really being more aggressive towards these protesters, I see that actually increasing the agitation and the sort of resistance and rebellion that we're seeing right now throughout the masses, right? If all of a sudden cops started cracking skulls, on like Cesar Chavez, for example, or like the 110, LA, I think, would radically shift in terms of its response. I think the masses would radically shift. And we have seen mostly police be somewhat less violent than I kind of predicted. So then it just means which one's going to wait out the other, right? Can the masses sustain this, or can the government, the bourgeoisie, hold out on being forcefully repressive and sort of wait out the protest? Similar to like a strike, right? Like, can the bosses wait out the strike and like eat the losses, whatever, and not succumb to the negotiation table? It's the same concept. So that's kind of the dilemma we're having right now. And we are seeing certain localities pick up in terms of sanctuary city ordinances. That's really good. I think that needs to increase, even here in LA, right? Like LA, Metropolitan picked up a city ordinance, but the county did not, as far as I know. Other cities have mainly not. So that's a big step, is getting other municipalities to forcefully sort of separate themselves from this fascist federal onslaught on migrants and immigrants, right? I think that in large part, when we're talking about organization, because I've seen this be another topic of conversation, at least especially online, is, are we seeing horizontal structured movements here, similar to Occupy, similar to even like Black Lives Matter to a degree, right? Like that whole movement. That was largely horizontal structure, right? There wasn't a top-down hierarchical structure. There wasn't mass centralization of these efforts. It was very decentralized. And I'm of the opinion at this point in time that this has a dual character to it. There is definitely an aspect to it that is decentralized, that is horizontal in nature, that is mainly spontaneous, right? Like there's absolutely that element to it. But I do see also organizations that are highly centralized, that this is not spontaneous for them. They've been building up to this for some time, both in terms of organizational capacity and in terms of just output. Like for example, like Centro CSO here in LA, which is connected to FRSO. Shout out to the comrades over there. They've been doing a lot of work for years when it comes to deportations, immigrant and migrant rights. So this is a natural like step up for them. And that's why if you've seen any footage from LA protests, a lot of them you have seen Centro members at. They've been lead organizers too. So we do have this example of, you know, centralized organizers that are not horizontally based and structured, that do have democratic centralism, that are highly organized, and are Marxist-Leninists running these protests, organizing these protests, leading these protests. So to me, that's a very different character than Occupy, for example, where there wasn't that sort of communist, you know, Marxist sort of angle to it, or at least presence to it, at least from my remembrance. Maybe other comrades that were around there more than me back then could attest to it and maybe disagree, but from my recollection, there wasn't that mass presence. The growth of Marxist and communist groups in the last decade or so is kind of in a response to the Occupy movement and failure. So what we're seeing right now, to me, is a shift. And the Palestinian movement and peace movement absolutely was a part to that, because these two things are very, very connected. I see a lot of similar organizers carrying over from these two movements. And the Palestinian peace movement was highly centralized. It was highly organized. It was not a horizontally structured movement in any form. It was highly hierarchical in terms of who was running it. And that's not a bad thing. It was like 3 organizations running it throughout the entire country. That's highly, highly centralized. That's not at all similar to what we saw in Occupy. With this, we're seeing a little bit more decentralization just due to the amount of immigrant rights groups that are in the discussion, that are in the movement. We're talking about like coalition building. When we did the Sanctuary City Coalition for LA, that was tons of organizations. That was, I mean, at least 10 different organizations that were involved. So in a sense, at that point, some of these coalitions are decentralized, but these are coalitions that are carrying over from movement to movement, and there's some sustaining power there. So that's all really good signs. But I think regardless, like I said, this type of intensity cannot be sustained long term. There's going to be a break at some point. These protests are going to have to take like a weekend off. Like that's just a reality. You know, like there's burnout with this, and for like seasoned organizers, they didn't start last week. They've been around for years. So this again is a continuation of many struggles. The hope is that there's a huge portion of this country that is not involved in political action or struggle, and that is a huge like sort of fresh wave into the movement that can propel those that are feeling burnout to keep going. So that's an interesting dynamic that we could see play out. But again, I don't think, we're going to see like this go on for another week? Can we see some sort of political wins here, though? Can this lead to certain municipalities, counties, cities adopting ordinances, adopting laws to protect migrants and immigrants? Absolutely. And I think that in the short term is what we need to plan for and organize for, because that type of organization and movement is a natural building step to more militant work that might be required and most likely will be. Like Trump's fascism is not slowing down in any way. There's a really good article. I highly recommend it for people to check out on People's World. I think it's by C.J. Atkins, about sort of the coup attempt that we're seeing in real time from like Elon Musk and his cohorts, right? And I kind of not dismiss, but I kind of disagree with the term coup. That's not exactly what we're seeing here, in my opinion. But digressing, this sort of hostile takeover of government functions and apparatuses by Nazi billionaires is deeply alarming. And again, it's not slowing down in any way. So when we talk about all these executive orders and laws, it is extremely hard to keep up with, and we're going to get more and more of it. And I just want to prepare people mentally for that. It's going to be a tough 4 years. Frank over on Twitch saying, Matt, my brother, what's good, bro? I'm good, man. I'm good, Frank. I'll be honest. I don't know if I shared. I know you're kind of just a Twitch watcher. You don't go to YouTube. We did have a podcast a couple weeks ago. I don't know if because it wasn't live streamed. It might not have gone on Twitch. You might have missed it, Frank. I apologize. You might have missed a show. But regardless, if you want more of like an election breakdown, Frank, I really went in depth there. Plus with my article on Substack. Yeah, because there's a lot in the numbers there in terms of how Trump won, how he was able to coalesce forces. It's just settler colonialism. That's the answer. But digressing. What else? I didn't want to stay on for long. I know I've only been on for like 20 minutes. Frank, I know you're the only one commenting in the chat. What do you want me to talk about, man? Any questions, any thoughts, man? I'll briefly share what I've been reading. Trying to get through this National Liberation, Socialism, and Imperialism. Selected writings by Vladimir Lenin. He's such a sassy guy. Like Kendrick Lamar would have loved Lenin. If he reads him. Like, the guy is the pettiest person that's ever walked the earth. Just a mean-spirited guy. Love it. Love it to death. Also rereading Dawn of the Apocalypse by Gerald Horne. And also maybe a little bit of a hint of that special guest coming in a week or so. Just saying. Just saying. Very excited for that. But what else? I don't have it on me. It's over there on my bed, unfortunately. But I'm also reading Red Star Over China. I'm finishing that up. Just reading a lot at the same time. Frank saying, been rough for immigrant families, bro. The fear they instill is real. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that's very palpable. I mean, in LA, I forget the exact number. It's like 70 or 80% of families are are immigrant families or come from immigrant families. So, like, the vast majority of people in LA are either immigrants or they're related to someone that is an immigrant. And not, let alone like migrant families. Like mostly everyone here in California has some family story of somebody working like the fields and going through that migratory pattern of work at some point in like the 20th century. Like everyone does. And it's ridiculous to see this sort of attack on our community members. I think, to me at least, it's the more they attack on that, not to be like an accelerationist, but the more they press on that, the more we have natural like coalitions form, the more easy, so to speak, and maybe that's the very wrong word to use, but it'd be easier to like galvanize the masses. Because like when 70% of the people in LA County, so like that's what, like 2 or 3 million people, are all connected to like the immigrant story, and you're attacking them and their families. Like that's the majority of people here. You're pissing off the majority. Like what a stupid thing to do. And so quick too. I'll be honest. I'm very shocked at how fast Trump and like his MAGA cohorts are moving. I did not expect them to move this quickly. I think there's a dual factor to that of like it's a flooding of information that people can't keep up with. So like you just get drowned by atrocities in a way, and you get lost in it. And it's very hard to like pick on one struggle and like go to it, centralize that effort, and win that struggle because there's so many struggles to pay attention to. So like that's a hard thing. But then again, because of this onslaught, like I feel so many people that were kind of on the fence be like, nah, fuck that guy. No, I don't agree with this. This is weird. This is weird. It's turning weird. And that's good. Like to see more and more people get that sort of, what would you call it? That mystification of capitalism kind of falling in front of them. You do see that. And again, not to be an accelerationist, because like this is bad. Like what Trump is doing is really, really bad. I know the numbers. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. Like the first week or so of this second Trump term, he did deport less people than Biden's first week. So like I do want to point that out. Like the Democrats have completely capitulated to this, and not only now, because they are completely capitulating to this threat that they themselves have said is like Hitler, like he's a Nazi. Like they've said that too, and they're not wrong in saying that. But now they're just rolling over and letting this happen. Like the entire Senate unanimously voted for Marco Rubio. Like think about that. Like one of the worst, most inept Republicans, let alone just a plain fascist, right? And a horrible anti-communist. The entire Democratic Senate voted to confirm him for the cabinet for Trump. Like 99-0. So that means like maybe like one person abstained, and like maybe that one person was Bernie. And even then, like, what are we doing here? Like honestly. Like there's no real establishment government opposition in work right now. That does not exist, at least at the federal level. That just does not function right now. And again, this is decades now of the Democrats capitulating to far right rhetoric, policy, and laying the groundwork for a Trump to not only win but win again and push this type of rhetoric, right? Because like think about it. When Trump was going after like Medicare, SSI, Social Security, like when he was going after all those things in that first week, and that kind of got called back and rolled back because of like courts, I want to say. Like he rescinded that, I'm pretty sure. But he did do that, and he went on the attack on like these very key things of like, hey, your grandma, your disabled nephew, whoever, right? They need that to survive. They need that for medical care to survive. They don't have it anymore, potentially. And what do the Democratic establishment do? Like Chuck Schumer gets on a podium and says, Trump is defunding the police. How dare he? People are losing their medical care, their Social Security benefits, and he's getting up there saying that Trump is defunding the police, and that's the bad thing. That's the only bad thing involved in that. Like, what are we doing here, Democrats? Like, I'm confused when you're going to be oppositions here. I mean, of course they're not, but I mean, you've said this guy's Hitler. Act like this guy is Hitler. It's not that hard. But again, this is neoliberalism like 101. Of course they're doing this. And you even have I'm gonna get mad. You even have like Sean Fain, who came out last year like the next like labor icon, right? Went hard for Palestine, went hard against like the big four automakers, right? Like the UAW strike was big. It was a big deal. What does he do when Trump's throwing out all these tariff wars that's going to hurt the average American consumer, worker? What does he do? He says the tariffs are good. We just don't like him going after immigrants. And when you have the labor leadership, the labor leadership of the country, like Sean Fain became the guy, right? He is now supporting Trump's economic regressive policies. He supports trade wars with China and Mexico and Canada. How does that make sense? It's not going to make jobs here. Like, what are you smoking, Sean? You're the head of the UAW. You can't be rolling over to a fascist president that is attacking the Department of Labor as we speak. It makes no sense to me. You know, and that's where like the theory of like labor aristocracy comes in. And I mean, for those that know that, they know. I mean, that it explains that, you know, settler colonialism, class collaborationism, like all that makes sense, right? Like I understand the theory, but it's still so maddening to see this happen in real time, where you think that these institutions of opposition that should be there are just not. And that's a really concerning factor. The fact that labor, because like throughout the Democratic Party, like, yeah, I can rant about them. They suck. But like, we know that. Like, we know the Democrats aren't going to do anything here. They didn't do anything against Bush, against Reagan. You know, they're not going to do anything really against Trump. I mean, they've only been talk against Trump. They've never been action against his policy. They've never been about that, ever. So we get that. But labor, like, we have worked for so long to, like, rejuvenate the labor movement. And for their upper leadership in this moment of crisis, roll over and again not be the oppositional resistance that we need them to be, right? It's deeply concerning. And I don't know what that leads to. I think that when we talk about in the last show how 45% of labor households voted for Trump, like we're seeing this dichotomy between the country that the fascist movement is building, and it's sustaining its base in a way that I think most people thought there was going to be drop off due to Trump's like eccentricities or whatever, right? Like most people thought like, oh, Trump's weird, like people are going to fall off. But like a lot of the country's weird. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are weird. A lot of people have weird politics, weird worldviews, you know, eclectic ones as well. Like a lot of people, workers included, because of us living in a bourgeois society, and not only that, but like the bourgeois society, the hegemonic imperial powerhouse of the last 100 years, it's difficult to come away with that with a true like proletarian ideology, as like Lenin or Marx would say. You're gonna be tainted by this reactionary culture, and working through that takes years and years. It takes effort, and most people aren't going to snap out of it. So if that's most people, and again, this is my opinion, maybe people have different opinions, but I see that when I interact with people out in the real world. I see that when I look at the numbers, when I look at how Trump won, I see it in the numbers. This sort of eclectic politics are at play, right? Where people can clearly see issues, right, and still make the wrong decisions, right? Like, let alone like separate like the people that think like all Mexicans are bad and that like racist white, like pure white supremacist bullshit. There's people that are like, I would just worry about the economy. Like, I just want to make sure, like, I have, like, bread and eggs at the table, right? Like, there's a lot of those people. And they still voted for the guy that's not going to do that at all. They still voted for the guy that is going to hurt them economically more than ever. You know? And the petty bourgeoisie is completely captured by Trump and MAGA. That's just a reality. You talk to your local small business owner, all of them are the most reactionary garbage you can meet. Like, it's just a reality. Like, all. Like, maybe your uncle's nice. Yeah, cool. But, like, all of them, they're all cool with, like, deporting immigrants. They all think that's going to bring back jobs or something, when they themselves are probably an immigrant or son of an immigrant or daughter of an immigrant too. Like, that's just the sad reality of our country. So again, tough uphill battle. I don't mean to end on a sad note. Trying to think of like a happy note to end the show on. Get organized. Like I said in the last show. Yeah, it's like Trump won. Like, there's a lot of alarming things when you look at the data, look at the numbers. But it's also the same year where a communist presidential ticket got the most votes in history. Like, more votes than when we ran as the party back in the 30s and 40s. Like, better than Gus Hall, better than Foster. Like, when we talk about like other like big communist tickets in the past, last year was the biggest. It had the most votes by far. Like, I want to say like 60,000 more votes than the previous record holder. Not including Eugene Debs, who was not a communist, he was socialist, but digressing. It's like, that's a good sign. We've seen almost every communist organization double or triple in numbers in the last 5 to 10 years. DSA, for whatever their issues, is still a sizable organization with over 50,000 members, give or take. It's not at its peak as it once was, but it's still pretty sizable. Labor leadership is labor aristocracy and the imperial core, so there's major issues there. But we have seen a rise in labor militancy, a rise in labor rhetoric and pro-labor rhetoric. Those are all good signs. Is it enough for the next 4 years? Those are all different questions to ask. I think that it could get really bad for a lot of folks. And I think preparing for community defense is almost an imperative right now. Develop rapid response networks. If your organization doesn't have one already, that's a discussion to have. Like, how do we have an internal, like, rapid response network where when shit goes down, we can race to it? That's kind of our responsibility. Like, if you're a communist out there, it's your job now to kind of push through all the bullshit and step up. You're a professional revolutionary. Like, it's time that we all act like it in a way that maybe we're so busy with internal like disputes and petty debates in the last 4 years where like those debates don't matter as much right now. With the threat that's there and that's rising, why are we going to have these petty debates? Like, I don't agree with DSA's electoral strategy. I don't. I think they have a horrible electoral strategy. I'm still going to work with DSA people. Like, I think Trotskyism is bullshit. Like, I think it's a weird group. But a lot of them work on, like, Cuba solidarity efforts. So I'm always going to be in there with Trots and helping out if I can. I don't like liberals, but guess what? There's going to be a lot of liberals and progressive-minded people that aren't socialists, aren't communists, aren't really leftists, but out there because they don't want immigrants to be deported and, like, put in camps. And they are more galvanized right now. Even though Biden did it a lot, even though Obama deported more people than any president in U.S. history, like, it's more important now. It's more front and centered, at least. The rhetoric has changed, so then the response has to change too. I think that's a natural thing for human beings. And my only other advice for us communists out there is be an inviting space. Be an open space to all these people that are now upset, that now want to do something about it. Don't be weird. Don't be weird. Don't be off-putting. Like you gotta make sure that you're creating these spaces that people want to come to, that they feel listened to, they feel heard, and they feel like there's solutions being talked about and worked towards. Especially if you're in a mass org, right? Like you're not in like a specific org where like only communists are going to be in. Like you're going to have eclectic political ideologies intermixing right now because of coalitions forming, very broad coalitions forming. Be that inviting space, That's all I have for right now, folks. I will be back on, like I said, I'll be back on next week for sure. For sure. Next week, Saturday, I'm recording with the great Professor Colin Bodale. I believe I pronounced his last name. Colin, if you're watching or listening and I mispronounced your last name, I apologize. But Colin Bodale, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Fantastic philosophy professor. He's going to jump on Saturday. We're going to record a podcast talking about Hegel, the founder of like modern dialectics, sort of, or Hegelian dialectics, I should say, because then you have like Marxian dialectics. But anyways, we're going to talk about that and decipher what Hegel's importance is, his legacy, his theory, his philosophy. Because I tried reading Hegel like years ago, and it was like so difficult. I immediately put it away. So I don't know much about it, and I feel like it's a missing part in my development as a Marxist. So why not have someone on here and kind of feed me the information and us? Because we're all not going to read Hegel. Come on. Like reading Marx is hard sometimes. It's okay to admit that. Like reading Capital, that's not fun. So like reading Hegel's homework. Let's be honest about that. Frank saying, you still watching boxing? Yes, Frank. I still watch boxing. My wife, God bless her soul, over there behind the camera, she watches it every time it's on. So I don't get a break from it. Even if I want to stop watching boxing, I cannot choose that for myself because of my wife. She runs my life. That's how it works. Definitely not gonna be watching that Canelo Jake Paul fight though. That shit's trash. Screw that. Shout out to Dave Benavidez. That guy's a warrior, cocaine hero. That was a really good fight this last weekend. Sorry, digressing. Also, working on an interview. I'll announce it. It's not official yet. We're working on it with the great Gerald Horne. Yes. I know. That's a big one. I'm really hyped about that. We've started emailing each other, trying to set up day and time and all that stuff. He is in LA this weekend. So I'm going to actually see him give a lecture at the Black Lantern bookshop, I believe is the name of the bookshop. If I'm wrong, I apologize. I have not been to this bookshop before. But they're also doing it in collaboration with Midnight Books, who I know very well. Shout out to Gabe. If you're ever in the Huntington Park area, Midnight Books is a great bookstore to go to. But I know they're doing a collaboration. Gerald Horne's going to be talking about armed struggle. So I'm very, very excited for that. So I'm going to see him this weekend. If all things go. And knock on wood, no horrible plane crashes happen, because that's a big issue apparently now. But yes, Gerald Horne next week sometime, hopefully recording that podcast as well. So 2 big podcasts coming up with Colin Bodale and Gerald Horne, 2 big time professors, little old me, talking about Hegel and then Black liberation and settler colonialism. That's gonna be a very, very fun talk. I'm very, very excited for that one. I've also emailed a 3rd guest and trying to set up that one, though I have not gotten communication back yet, but I do expect it eventually. And that one's going to be really special too. If I get all these done, especially like in the next week or two, like my entire year's worth of like goals for like interviews are done. I'll be set. But digressing, hit the like button, share the show, all that fun stuff. I'll be back on next weekend. Won't be a live stream, but I'll make sure it's up on Twitch this time, Frank. I apologize. What else? Links down below in the description. Linktree. Go there. Substack, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. That's where you find all my work. Yeah. Have a good one. I think that's it. Peace.
Что такое советская власть? Be clear here, not confused. I'm a socialist.
Chile is rich. Only the people are poor.
As long as they're working class, you'll have a communist party.
What's that book I got? The Russian guy? Stalin. I got that.
Fidel Castro, support our struggle to the hilt.
It is impossible for capitalism to answer the needs of the American people.
If I am a revolutionary, and you're gonna have to keep on saying that.
And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
We are bound to transform society. As far as crushing the party, it's impossible to crush the party because the party is one with the people.
There's capital versus labor. Because there's always conflict.
You don't mean exactly peace talks, you mean capitulation, surrendering. That's kind of conversation between the sword and the neck, you mean.
We know that what we